And from looking at your research, it was interesting to see that a lot of the research going on in these fields, it's centered around how to attack better. And it's interesting because it's you like the kind of the philosophy that you get from it is understanding how to attack better, you understand also how to defend better. Yeah, like could you basically is that the philosophy behind it? Is that like you have to break some eggs to learn how to put the egg back together?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a general kind of mindset and feature of sort of the computer security and privacy kind of research. Um, uh, you have to sort of understand the problem before you can fix it. So um, a lot of work is, as you say, for example, centered around kind of attacks because that's how you sort of demonstrate that something is a problem. And so what we've sort of gotten fairly good at is trying to think of new ways that, for the privacy example, trying to leak some private information, demonstrating them, and then hopefully eventually with the understanding of doing that enough, you can come up with effective ways to prevent that from happening. But you sort of can't start at the level of the defense first because the defense can only exist once you know that a particular attack is possible or not. So a lot of the work we do in computer security and privacy is really trying to map out or characterize the attack surface of the system. So if you think of a system, you can think of like its attack surface. What are all the ways that it could be attacked? And once you have a good handle on that, then you can try to start thinking about what are the kind of defenses that you could use to kind of close off this attack surface, right?
So if you have a house and you could try to think how to get into the house, and of course there's a door, so you lock the door, but then somebody else, I could get into the window, and you then close the window. It's that, I can go to the chimney, then I'll just put something in there, right? So I think it's cool, and even if you have something that, I'm not sure if this is a worry even of attacks that cannot be defended against, then at least it's useful that that's a possibility. So like maybe like in an abstract example, it's like, if you know that you're making transactions with the bank, then there's probably something that somebody can get your credit card number. Then maybe I won't use my credit card number, right? That's useful, and that's of course like a made up example, but is that a thing?
I mean, it can be depending on, usually that would be largely prevented by the kind of cryptography we have and other security measures. But yeah, that would, if that was the case, there would be such so an example, a real life example of this might be if you go to a website, like some e-commerce website, you want to buy something and you're about to reveal your credit card, but you realize that it's not using what we call HTTPS or sometimes TLS, SSL, TLS, right? You don't see the padlock on your browser window, or it says connection unsecured. Then that should be a sign that actually the cryptography that's supposed to be there is not there, and maybe you should not go ahead and reveal
right. It's useful,
your information. But yeah, absolutely, that's sort of a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and also the memberships that can come, the attacks into these models can come in many ways. Like one cool one I think you talked about in your course is imagine that you're in a self-driving car and somebody shows a picture to your car that makes the car think, oh my god, I'm gonna to go into a bridge or something, and I have to like go to the other side of the road, and then increases your likelihood of getting into a crash. That's real, like that's a possibility.
Yeah. So that's what we would call sort of adversarial examples, and where this comes up is that we're solving problem or trying to solve at least problems like self-driving with machine learning type, deep learning type approaches. And one of the things that people realized in the last 5-7 years is that although these things are pretty good, and we've talked about some of the great applications, and in some cases there are specific tasks where these models are actually better than kind of human performance, they're actually brittle in some way, which is that if an attacker can give you exactly the wrong input, it can actually influence what the model is going to do. And if the model is part of a system, let's say a self-driving car, then now all of a sudden you don't know what the self-driving car is going to do, right? So what you have to think of is well, if you're designing a roadside recognition model to be integrated in a self-driving car, in a way, not only does it have to work in kind of the normal environment where your car drives around and it sees stop signs and red lights and so on, but you would also want it to be robust against a potential adversary that may use that model as an attack vector, right? Because if that's possible, then you have a problem, right? And so now what we start to kind of think about when we look at this system that incorporate machine learning is we have to think of the machine learning components of the system as part of the attack surface, right? Because they themselves could be attacked, right? So, if you think of a traditional car that doesn't have any machine learning because it doesn't have any self-driving, it's just an old car that, can basically drive and the human just steers, there's no significant sort of computation happening, then we know sort of what the attack surface, right? If it's not connected to the internet, well, you can't really hack into it. And so we understand what can go wrong, right? Maybe mechanical failure can go wrong or sabotage can go wrong. Somebody can, poke a hole in your tires or whatever, like something like that. But now if you have a self-driving car that has some machine learning components, not only do you have to worry about the rest of the car, but you have to worry about that too, right? So you have to worry about can the car be hacked because it's connected to the internet in some way, or can the machine learning model in the car be hacked because it's not robust in one way or another.
Yeah, and there's people working on that. So knowing that that's a possibility, again, knowing that that's a problem, makes an opportunity for people to go there and try to solve that problem, right? And try to come up with ways to make the model robust, of make it less likely, and even it could be non attacks with not really bad intentions to her, like you could consider this attack if you're in a self-driving car and just a kid steps into the front of the self-driving car because he knows that the self-driving car is not gonna run over him and it's just gonna stay there. So it's a funny thing. So you have to think about that this is a problem and you have to somehow go around the kid that's just messing with you.
Yeah. So that's what we would call a type of denial of service type attack. I mean, by analogy to the more traditional denial of service attack on the internet. But yeah, I mean, I think the broader theme here that we should perhaps flag is that it's one thing to solve a problem sort of in the lab, or sort of I don't know, you come up with your machine learning model, but then once you want to actually build a system around it and deploy that in the real world and make it work at scale, then you have all these additional issues that you have to start worrying about. And the interesting, I guess, security issues that I worry about are, well, what if you're deploying you're deploying the thing in the real world, but it's not that the real world is benign. There's now some adversary, right? There's somebody that's trying to actively make the thing not work or make something bad happen. And so now you have to start thinking, well, what could they do? How do you prevent what they could do? And so on.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because that you could ask the question of okay, well, why are they doing this? if they are computer scientists and you learn all the skills that could be useful and put into like something useful, why have these attacks? And that's like a broader humanity question.
I think
right.
Yeah, I think we have to sort of also think that one is, it's not necessarily the case that we need to have somebody trying to attack something one way to make it a problem worth solving. Because, for example, in this example of the self-driving car, even if nobody is going out on the road and trying to create these, adversarial road signs, it is a pretty bad problem from just kind of a robustness of the machine learning model by itself, that these things are even possible. Like in an ideal case, if you really think of what it would mean to solve the self-driving problem, surely you would want it to be robust to that kind of attack as well. The other thing is that it's not always obvious to see ahead of time why somebody is going to do a particular attack. So an example maybe I can think of here is this idea of ransomware. I'm sure many you may have heard of ransomware. Some other people may have heard too. So ransomware is where you have some malware that gets into your computer and then encrypts your file. And then once your file are encrypted, they know that you can't get access to them because you don't know the encryption key.
Like a computer virus.
And then and then it's a computer virus that basically encrypts your file. And then they ask you to pay some ransom, right? Some money, maybe in Bitcoins or something like that, to get the decryption key so you can get back access to your file. And so the point is, if you think of it this way, if somebody had thought, before ransomware was a thing, what if somebody breaks into your computer and they don't mess anything, they don't delete anything, they don't do anything bad, they just encrypt your file? You'd say, well, why would anybody do that? But now we know, well, if somebody does that, they can get a ransom from you, and actually people do pay the ransom.
Yeah.
So just because something doesn't seem ahead of time to be, some attack that people might want to do, doesn't mean it won't be. I think, perhaps the best way to think of attacks and which one we should consider to be important to deal with is not based on whether we think somebody would want to do this attack, but based on the feasibility of them, right? So I'm much less concerned about an attack that is very difficult to orchestrate for whatever reason. Maybe it's just extremely difficult to make it work, compared to an attack perhaps that's easy to make it work and has maybe the same consequences, but I just can't think at the moment of why somebody would perpetrate that attack.